On board. Hey everyone, welcome to the island. My name is Craig and I'm the guide for the first of the two-part tour. So a very quick breakdown of what to expect. First part of the tour will take you around Robben Island. Second part of the tour will be inside of the building on your right hand side. Now the second part of the tour is conducted by a former political prisoner, and when that person meets you and takes you inside, they're sharing with you their personal story. So the idea is, with a personal narration, unfortunately you cannot record the experience itself once the prison tour starts. You can take as many pictures as you like, ask as many questions, but unfortunately it cannot be caught on running motion, audio or visual itself. From that point onwards, you're going to take a short walk back down to the harbour, and that will get you back in time for your boat. Should we run late, the boat will wait for you. They will do a total count. No one will be left behind. You have my personal guarantee. Should you be left behind, there is a backup plan, and that is that we have more than enough sleeping accommodation. My name is Craig, my colleague behind the wheel is Faith. We're going to safely take you around.
We need Mandela's room. Eventually we're going to have congestion as we try and cover the same areas at the same time, and that's going to form queues and then we're going to lose time. So the way I do my tour is I take you to the furthest point in the tour, which has a beautiful view of Table Mountain and Capetown. We'll take a break at that point, and then basically when you come back to the bus, I start the tour from that point and I work my way back down to the prison. So I do everything, I just do it in the opposite direction, and that's avoiding the other buses essentially. Giving you some running commentary so you know exactly what you're looking at. Robben Island is going to strike you in two ways. Number one, it is a lot bigger than it looks from the other side itself. Robben Island is a 12-kilometer distance in an oval shape. That's about 7 miles in total. You have about 475 hectares of land on this island itself. You find that the distance to Milnerton, which is about 7.2 kilometers away. Table Mountain and Capetown is 11.5 kilometers away. The second thing about this island that strikes people is that it looks very uniform in its design, was copy-paste in its style, and that speaks to its military origins. Robben Island was not built as a political prison, it was started as a military base at the beginning of the Second World War. So the first line of defense for Table Bay and Capetown, you'll find that they stationed about nearly 2,500 people on this island. Not all soldiers, some of them were allowed to bring their families with them. You find later on the guards and their families took up residence in these houses, replacing the soldiers. So you have the guards and their families, and then today we have the staff for the museum. We have a total population of 150 people living on this island right now. All staff are given the option of living here, but you'll find we keep the population at 150. Simple reasoning is the more people there is, the higher the risk of fire and accidental damage on the island itself. On your left hand side, 7.2 kilometers away. It's about 4 miles in total. Straight up ahead, you have Table Mountain and Capetown, once again 11.5 kilometers away. That's just under 7 miles in total. As we take the turn, you might spot some penguins in the area. They're mostly on the rocks over there, so you're going to need some form of magnifying device, either binoculars or zooming in on your camera, but the black and white figures alongside the rocks over there are actually penguins in the distance. The reason why the penguin is such an important part of the tour itself is unfortunately the African penguin is an endangered species. So you find that about 24 years ago there was an oil spill in the Cape area and it devastated their population. You find many breeding sites was established. Robben Island, Boulders Beach was among them, and for nearly 23 years we brought up their population, their total numbers. The problem was about a year ago they detected a strain of influenza amongst the Boulders Beach's penguins, and they had the estimate that it probably had spread to the other colonies already. Unfortunately they were correct in their assessment, and the penguin population is once again devastated to the point that they are an endangered species once again. For that reason, in the next area, unfortunately we must ask that the vegetation is completely out of bounds. The tarred surface is man-made. Essentially you can use roads, structures, toilet facilities. That's all usable, but the vegetation unfortunately needs to be refrained from essentially. Then up ahead you have a blue frame over there. That frame's table mounted in Capetown. That is ideal for your photos. To the left hand side you have a larger structure that is Alpha 1. It sells various refreshments inside. Alongside of it is a flat surface building with 2 wooden open doors, or should be, and that is your toilet facilities in this area itself. That will wrap up your 3 options. 2 things to keep in mind. Number 1, nothing can be picked up. That is for the sake of preservation. Number 2, please come back to your original seats, and that is for the sake of peace on board from past experience. Essentially what comes about, from the very last person to disembark from this bus, I start the clock at 7 minutes. Now to be very blunt with you, 7 minutes, 3 options. Photo, shop, toilet. 7 minutes gives you enough time to do one of the 3. Choose wisely and enjoy it. Go bus number 5. What we have is the village once again, just to give it more detail. So 2 things about the village people usually ask about is fresh water and electricity. Where does it come from? Fresh water, we have a desalination plant on the island which was built about 13 years ago, and unfortunately one of the things we learned the hard way. Desalination is very convenient, but it consumes mass amounts of electricity. So you find the diesel power generators were just simply not enough. The next idea was about 6 years ago to build a solar farm the size of a cricket field. That powered the desalination plant, and accidentally we actually had enough left over to power the rest of the island. So Robben Island, you'll find, by mistake, actually went green, which is a good thing, but we cannot claim credit for it at the end of the day. You find that the village itself, the church on the left hand side, is the reason why the village is actually here. So that church stood at the center point of the original village in this area. This was during the 1800s for a British garrison, hence the church is called the Garrison Church. Now that British garrison was eventually moved and their village fell into ruin. Then at the beginning of the Second World War, they found the church, or what remained of it, and they rebuilt it, essentially restored it, and they maintained the original construction date of 1841. What they then did is they built a new village around it, the one you currently see. But one of the old traditions that survived because of the church is that inside documentation was found to say that whenever there's a baby born, they fly a flag above the church. So it's pink or blue in color. This was done during the Second World War period, then again during the prison period by the guards and their families. And today on the island we still fly the flag, but with only 150 people, admittedly we do not have many babies being born on the island. I'm going to leave it at that. Essentially what comes about is that I do remember, however, the last baby born, and will remember it for a long time, because it caused a bit of confusion. Tradition says for every baby born, we fly a flag for 1 week. In September last year, there was a baby boy born,
and they flew the flag, and it accidentally got flown for 3 months. Not because multiple baby boys was being born, but the very simple reason somebody forgot to take it down. But it shows the practice is still well and alive. Also February 14th, Valentine's Day. If you want to get married inside of that church, you'll find that we did permit you to do so. No joking. Okay.
It's a query.
Did everybody hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I do not do an orthodox tour. Very simple reason is you'll find that studying not just South African but world history, one thing became apparent. You'll find that the apartheid system seems like a South African story when it's not. It's a continuation of something that has occurred right throughout the world. The concept is very simple. If you take a group of people and you treat them badly in an equal manner, you give them a common enemy, and they'll all eventually unite against you. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The strange thing about human nature is take the exact same group, subdivide them, now treat them badly on a descending scale, a little bit less to each, and you create the illusion of classes between them. They fight each other more than they fight the system.
Oh yeah.
This is the concept of apartheid in a nutshell.
Crab in a
Working example
barrel.
on Robben Island, you'll find that essentially what they would do is give uniform according to racial category. That serves no purpose logically. Colored prisoners, someone of mixed descent or mixed heritage, my apologies, mixed descent or mixed heritage, long sleeve shirts, long pants and shoes. Black prisoner at exactly the same time, short sleeve shirts, short pants and no shoes. Logically, serves no purpose. Psychologically, creates animosity between the two, because it seems one is favored above the other. But the thing about apartheid is, it is not a system of random acts of cruelty. It is a concept of taking divide and conquer and making it the very DNA of a society. The way you achieve this is threefold: the education system, the media, and the mind of a child. A single generation. In 1950, the law was passed called the Group Areas Act. The Group Areas Act makes no logical sense on its own. It's a zonal policy determining where the racial categories will live. The reason why it does not make sense is because we think about it as adults. What point is it in making people live together of the same color? What we then fail to realize is the perspective of a child growing up. The generation that grows up in this will not interact with the other side. The only thing they know about those people is what they're officially being taught. And if the education system is filled with misinformation and mistruth, it is the foundation of preconceived idea. The next layer is state-controlled media. Before the invention of the internet, social media, Radios and newspaper was your fact finding or fact confirmation. So if radios and newspapers reconfirm what you've been taught in the schooling system, that is the education you are growing up with. That is the only thing you will know. You have an entire generation growing up indoctrinated. By the time they become adults, they don't just have preconceived ideas. They have now developed prejudice. They will judge those people before they even start speaking. The scary thing is you don't listen to learn. You listen to confirm what you already believe. And the scariest thing is, that is generation 1. They go on to become parents and they unintentionally teach their children in exactly the same light. You have set a system in play across generations in time that you change the norm of that society. You will not realize its abnormality. And one of my first controversial things to say in this, we still do the exact same thing in South Africa today. We judge even before the next person starts speaking based on the color of their skin.
Oh, yeah.
9 times out of 10, we just don't even realize we're doing it. But it's especially true for the older generations, because you'll find this kind of concept can only be broken not by years, but generation by generation. My 9-year-old has a level of tolerance and understanding that I can only aspire to, because she's grown up in a society that has facilitated her curiosity about the other side. She's a step in the process of the rebuilding of South Africa itself. Now, why did I take the time to explain this? Because it makes Robben Island that much more important. Robben Island was intended to be the dumping ground of political prisoners, especially the leadership. In 1960, an event took place that drew the attention of the world. They could no longer simply kill these individuals because they would turn them into martyrs. So they collected them up and they sent them to Robben Island, out of sight, out of mind, isolation until death. What they failed to realize in arrogance was they would not rule until the end of time. And effectively, what you have just done is taken individuals who could not cooperate because of divide and conquer outside. You brought them to a central location and given them the belief they would never see the light of day again. In desperation, they did the very things they could not do outside. Contact, communication, sharing of resources, and they got to know each other on a level never before seen. And not only did they survive Robben Island, they went on to become the future leadership of a nation yet to be born, with concepts and ideas that was born through discussion and debate that was larger than any one individual or organization could have come up with on their own. My next controversial statement: we make the big mistake of believing South Africa's freedom was the responsibility of one person. One person could not free a nation, nor could one person keep it together when the world expected civil war to erupt in this country. That was the work of a collective. 32 people that did not discover each other in the outside world. They found each other on Robben Island. You can have one Nelson Mandela and 31 followers and it will work. But when you take Nelson Mandela out of the equation, the 31 followers cannot continue. What Robben Island created was 32 Nelson Mandelas. Each of them intimately understood the plan and what was needed. So in 1994, they hit the ground running and they basically covered holes before they even became a problem. You'll find many concepts we enjoy as South Africans today was not contemplated, was not discussed and not created in the comfortable halls of Parliament as we see it right now. They were born in discussion and debate inside of the quarter you see on the left hand side. How these guys came to be here: political leaders upon arrival on this island were not kept in the general population. They were kept in single cells away from everybody else. They were prevented contact and communication, and under no circumstances was that rule broken. So when hard labor was introduced, and I need to be clear about this, hard labor we know officially today. In 1997, when we opened as a museum, we found stockpiles of materials from all of the 3 hard labor quarries. That eliminates the possibility that it's for productivity or profit. The only remaining possibility is that it's an act of punishment. Tire the body, tire the mind. A prison population that is exhausted is a prison population less likely to fight back. So the leadership brought to this area itself could not go to the other groups, could not work in the other quarries. Only the 32 of them would work here. And the 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, for 13 and a half years that they spent here, was the time that they took to speak to each other. Born of desperation and need to have contact and communication, people spoke here that would never have sat at the same fire in the outside world. And over a lifetime, they built a sense of camaraderie and trust. They realized that communication distracts the mind from what is happening to the body. That's a survival mechanism. Then they started discussing more and more The 7 guards assigned to this area could not have hoped to have stopped that communication from taking place, because they were fighting against human nature. At the end of the day, the 13 and a half years spent here covered everything from ideology, philosophy, political belief, problems faced by their different communities, and even their ideas for the future. They basically attended something as cliche as it may sound, but it is a concept of education that you cannot receive from a book. They were learning from life experiences of one person to the next. Each person's story was important because it contributed to the greater whole. And again, the many concepts we enjoy today was born of these discussions. Unfortunately, it could not happen without cost. Limestone gives off large amounts of dust which you're constantly inhaling. It eventually damaged the lungs at the point that tuberculosis, things like pneumonia, initially were quite common. That was the first indications of the damage done to the lungs. Later on, many people you'll find barely had enough time to contribute back to society before their time would be cut short. 9 times out of 10, when you look at their cause of death, it is something lung related. The long-term effects of this quarry itself. Mr. Mandela was one of the lucky few that lived to 95 years of age. Now, giving you a breakdown of the quarry and what it would look like. Again, the statistics: 32 political leaders from around the country, 7 guards. The structure above is a battery observation post from World War II. The cave on the far side you'll find was used as their toilet. They would place 5 to 6 buckets inside. Now, unfortunately, there's no sewage system in the surrounding areas or drainage point, so 5 to 6 prisoners would have to carry the buckets back to the prison itself to be cleaned, emptied, and prepared for the next day's use. From the cave itself, if you go ahead of the area, there's a large chunk missing over there, and that is ultimately what they took out in the 13 and a half years that they worked in this area itself. Then there's a pile of stones at the beginning of the quarry. That was actually the last addition to this area that was put together on the 11th of February of 1995. Now, if 11th February sounds familiar but you don't know from where, 11th February of 1990 was Mr. Mandela's release date. So by 1995, he's the then president, celebrating his personal 5th year of freedom. You find, unbeknownst to him, in Parliament, in government itself, they were planning a state gala event inviting dignitaries from around the world. When Mr. Mandela discovered it, his response was something that they couldn't have anticipated. He responded in anger, and it was in 2 directions. Number 1, they were taking a story of how what many people had basically walked this journey, and they were making it about one man. And number 2, they were using state payer or taxpayers' money to celebrate that one man's milestone. He felt that it would be inappropriate to do, so the state gala was cancelled. Instead, the funds was taken, and any former prisoner who was able to attend would be paid for to make their way to Robben Island to commence the first reunion of former political prisoners of its kind. To commemorate the event, 1,200 former prisoners each placed down a stone, building the pile you see on the left-hand side over there. And ladies and gentlemen, do we have any questions before we conclude this area? I once again will add, I am a very friendly person. This is just my face, it's the only one I've had since birth. I'm friendly on the inside.
C'était déjà organisé à cause du lien qu'il y avait créé ici. Comment pourquoi ils font passer par là? Ils pensaient que s'ils laissaient dans la population générale, ils n'étaient pas contaminés les villes prisonniers.
Ah, alors que non, en vrai, c'est.
Les rusés, là.
Après, je pense que s'occuper de un par un, ça aurait trop de personnel.
Exact, trop de garde. Ils disaient que dans les barrages, ils avaient leur chambre séparée. Ils ne pouvaient pas parler.
Quand ils travaillaient,
Ils travaillaient ici, dans leur mentalité, c'était une forme de punition. Le travail dans les villes ici, ça ne servait à rien. Les roches qu'ils récoltaient, ils ne s'en servaient pas vraiment pour les routes de la construction. Ça servait uniquement pour les punir, les souffrir. Donc, pourquoi ils ont fait? Ils amenaient à travailler ici, c'était pour les punir et qu'ils souffrent. Ils ne réalisaient pas, c'est en les faisant, en essayant de les punir, les prisonniers ont passé du temps à changer de
On this island, unfortunately, there was one person that was kept apart from everybody else. When they said isolation, in this man's case, they truly meant it. You find for 6 years he was never kept inside of the maximum security prison. He was kept inside of the house over there in the background on its own. Now, to give you a breakdown of this area so you know exactly what you're looking at, the structure is going down in 2 rows with gates in front of them. Those are dog kennels. The house in the center over there with a barrel in front of it, window facing towards the direction of the bus, that is where he was actually being kept. 6 years of isolation. In 6 years, unfortunately, once a month he could see a priest, once every 6 months his wife and family, and once a year a member of parliament. Given the guards assigned to him could not speak to him, so they assigned him 2 at a time. Because one guard in a confined space, doesn't matter the color of your skin, human nature says those 2 will eventually talk, guard and prisoner. But 2 guards assigned together, the idea is if one guard speaks, the other one is going to report it. It's a system of who watches the watchers. That's unfortunately suspicion that rules the day. You find the man kept inside of that house had the unenviable title of public enemy number 1. In fact, on Robben Island, his story is one that is unique. The man in question was a gentleman by the name of Robert Sobukwe was the founder of the Pan-Africanist Congress in 1959. By this point, he's a former lecturer of African Studies who was delving into linguistics. On 21st March of 1960, he brings about one of the largest demonstrations of that time. But what truly scares the government of that time to its core is what he was asking people to do. Simply break the law openly. Peacefully hand yourself over for arrest. Plead guilty to the charges presented against you. Serve your prison sentence. Now, it doesn't make much sense when you think about it in a small scale. But if you think about this over progression of time, on day 1, you have thousands of demonstrators. On day 2, you have tens of thousands. And it begins to escalate till eventually it's hundreds of thousands, till eventually you reach millions. The idea is the sentiment that there's more of us than there is prison cells in the country to accommodate for our number. We will break the legal arm of the system itself. Unfortunately, it relies upon one simple concept, that a non-violent demonstration will not be answered with violence in the return. Unfortunately, the government of that time saw the size of that demonstrations, tens of thousands in total, and they realized this is the starting point of a defiance campaign. To stop it in its tracks, unfortunately, they responded swiftly and brutally. And in many cases, they didn't just use violent force, they used lethal force. 200 people were dead by the time that day was done. Thousands more would be wounded, and we do not remember a day of defiance. We remember one of the darkest days of our history. March 21st last month was our Human Rights Day. It is in commemoration of March 21st of 1960. It is not in the celebration of human rights. It is in the memory of the lack thereof that was shown to the people on that day. But one town and one police station was immortalized. A bit earlier I mentioned an event that in 1960 brought about the attention of the world. That event is March 21st of 1960, but it's known by a slightly different name. One town, one police station's name was reported in newspapers worldwide. At that location, police formed a line on the inside of the police station's fencing, and the crowd outside unfortunately did not realize they were looking at a firing squad. When the order was given to open fire, 69 people were gunned down and killed, and a further 180 was wounded. The majority of them were shot in their backs. Of course, they couldn't have seen it coming. The town in question is the town of Sharpeville. The day itself is remembered as the Sharpeville Massacre. Now, the Apartheid government has just made a mistake. They just didn't realize it. Because you'll find, and this is where I'm going to be controversial once again, and I'm not going to pull my punches. I do apologize if I cause offense. South Africa back then, like South Africa today, was a member of the international community. It had embassies and ambassadors here and abroad. Governments of the world could not claim ignorance that they did not know what was happening here. The thing is, the South African government sweetened the economic deal to make them turn a blind eye. But the common working peoples of those nations were unaware of what was taking place in South Africa. So when the story of Sharpeville broke in newspapers worldwide, that was the eye-opener to the world at large. And it wasn't governments of the world who stood up in protest. It was the common working people themselves. They started by boycotting South African goods. And when governments failed to respond, sporting organizations, trade unions, and student groups took up the fight to bring about constant awareness. Not over a few days, but months that became years, that became decades.
and it forced governments into action. The apartheid government, at the receiving end for the first time of international awareness and pressure, you find unfortunately responded by seeing Robert Sobukwe as the most dangerous man to their rule. To understand this, he was already serving a 3-year sentence under the charge of incitement. You find he completes his sentence believing himself a free man. He does not know that Parliament has a special seating where they discussed his fate. They adjusted how long you could legally detain someone by making it 12 months, and it could be renewed by the Minister of Justice for another 12 months. And this could be done indefinitely. So essentially it's detention without trial till the day you die. Robert Sobukwe walks out of one 3-year sentence, and immediately outside he's rearrested under detention without trial to be kept up until the day he dies. He's transported to Robben Island. He will never see the inside of the maximum security prison. He will have no contact and communication officially with any prisoner or guard passing by. He's placed inside of the house, and he is seen as the most dangerous man in the country. Robert Sobukwe, you'll find, will be issued prison number 153/63. What that means is he's the 153rd prisoner to have arrived in 1963. Like Mr. Mandela was the 466th prisoner to have arrived in 1964. That's how 4664 comes about. Robert Sobukwe's difference was he has no prison sentence. There is no definite time period under which he will be kept, and he is not counted in the prison population. When they did the total prisoner count, because to the international community they were saying this man is a guest of the state, they would call him the +1. In fact, on each of the boats bringing prisoners to the island, they would have a total number of the prisoners basically written on a chalkboard. So as an example, 1,266 would be 1,266 +1. Robert Sobukwe was the one in total. Inside of that house, unfortunately, over years, the visitation started falling away. Instead of once a month with a priest, once every 6 months with his wife and family, and once a year with a member of parliament, the only reliable visit became the once every 6 months by wife and family, till eventually the priestly visit completely fell away. Now, to understand the devastating effect of this, because he cannot speak to the guards or prisoners alike, the only contact with another human being he's having is his visitations, essentially. Once every 6 months is far too long. That is 6 months of isolation at a time. It took only 4 years before the mental impact of this began to show. The Member of Parliament, on his occasional visit, came to Robben Island and officially reported that Robert Sobukwe is having trouble constructing his sentences. By year 6, he was refusing his meals, and he looked like a man that was ready to die. He had finally been broken. He was a shadow of his former self. But the problem was the world was now watching this island, and they were going to give this man a martyr's death. So they took him off the island to remove him from the public eye. They chose Kimberley because a mining capital does not receive much media attention. But Kimberley itself was too central, so they chose a small town outside called Khalishiwe. They placed him there under house arrest and under 24/7 police watch. And unfortunately, he was held up and until 1978. With the age of 53, only death would release this man. Unfortunately, he dies as a broken man, a shadow of his former self, because he could not realize his own importance. He could not see his work bear fruit. He could not see his former students, many of them basically invigorated by his talks and his concepts and ideas, who would become the early leadership of the Black consciousness movement in the 1970s, led by Steve Biko. He could not see the marches happening throughout the world, which eventually amounted to sanctions and economic pressure. And he could not realize in 1986, 2 things cripples the apartheid system: the economic pressure of the world and the struggle rising within the country itself. Robert Sobukwe could not understand his own importance. But the true tragedy of this man's story is, we as South Africans today still don't understand his importance, because we do not tell his story, and therefore we have not given him his honored place in history. And in a strange kind of way, we have allowed the apartheid government to win. Do you have any questions before we conclude the talk?
When did he die?
When did he die? In 1963. Sorry, 1978. He was 53. My apologies. The date was
53? Oh, Robert Sobukwe.
1978, 53 years of age.
In prison.
He was in Khalishiwe at the house arrest. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you'll find, unfortunately, this is where I'm going to say goodbye for the final time. When we get to the prison, I do not see you again. The simple idea is, you'll find the prison and the harbour was designed to be directly opposite from each other for easy prisoner transport. So it takes about 3 minutes walking up, it takes even less than time walking down because it's downhill. With that in mind, we cannot use another bus because it literally takes longer to load a bus than it does to actually walk back down. Please double check all of your personal possessions, make sure everything is with you before you disembark from the bus itself. Up and until the point we get to there. And it's more tempting to use again. Because you'll find the ultimate point of a system like apartheid is power and control. And that will be alluring to people for time immemorial. My point is, I hope that the South African system is the eye-opener to the world at large, so that the lesson can be learnt and we do not see its like again. Because if we do, it will be the greatest tragedy, not just in South African history, but in the history of humankind itself. We find South Africa needs to be that warning. But I hope one day South Africa will also be the symbol of hope that says that it is never too late for change. Until then, there's an old and simple saying that says, evil can only flourish if a few good people do nothing. Enjoy the rest of your talk, the rest of your day.
Oh. Gotta get up.
This way, please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
My name is Max.
Hi, Max.
How are you? I'll be your tour. Prison guide for the next 30 to 45 minutes. Welcome once again to Robben Island. Robben Island, ladies and gentlemen, is just less than 11 kilometers away from Capetown. It is a World Heritage Site. We also have the endangered African penguins, different types of birds, the Cape cormorants and the Bang cormorants. We also have bucks. First things first, no weapons are allowed in here. No liquor is allowed in here. No smoking is allowed in here. If you want to smoke, you can go to designated areas. But you're not allowed to smoke in here. This picture that we see here, these were the last prisoners to be released unconditionally here on Robben Island. And most of them, they were sentenced to life imprisonment, lengthy sentences. Now because it is cold outside here, I'm going to take you to one of the cells so that we can sit down and relax while I do the talk. May you kindly follow me, please.